Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time for just a quick recap from Senior Bowl. The actual Senior Bowl game just got done with just a very short bit ago, and I've been paying attention to it all week. Been listening as well to some others, feedback and what their thoughts have been, and some of the players who've caught their eyes, etc. And I wanted to highlight some of the players who I felt have, not been talked about so much, have not made the radar of at least some of the people that I listen to and follow so much. And just, I hear a lot of the same names get repeated, so just want to shine a light on some of the other guys who haven't, maybe didn't quite have good enough of weeks, or maybe they came on day 3 or something like that, that they just didn't kind of make the mainstream talking points, as well as even less mainstream channels here on YouTube, etc. But with that said, there were, in case you haven't been paying attention to the news cycle and you just are here for me, well, I appreciate it. A couple of big things, and I can get some of my input on some of these, like the Michael Penix versus Bo Nix, their performances this week. At the end of the day, I did think that Bo Nix did struggle days 1 and 2. 3 came on strongly, looked good. I'm not going to say excellent even on day 3. In the Senior Bowl game, looked fine, looked good. So I'm not going to hold this against him too much. Had he looked poor in the game on day 3, that'd be a different story. But there's so much new stuff going into a day like this. I'm not holding it against Bo Nix too much. A little bit. I'm not going to forget about it. I'll remember it throughout the process. It's a slight ding to Bo Nix, a slight positive in Michael Penix's book compared to Bo Nix when you compare those two directly. I felt Michael Penix all 3 days did outperform Bo Nix, even on day 3 of the practices. So there's that for that. Let's see if there's some other storylines. Just going through my notes for the American players here. Running back Ray Davis, does he make it on this list? He did, so we don't need to talk about that. But offensive line, Tyler Guyton's, of course, been a big story coming into the week. A lot of people wanted to see how he would do. A lot of people were excited about how he would do. Apparently, the NFL is very, very high up on him. He did not hurt his stock, that's for sure, but he didn't necessarily guarantee himself being a number 1 pick or anything like that. He had a good week, not a dominant week throughout the 3 practices that he was in. He didn't play in the game because he had gone out. He had proven enough, I would say. So, kind of a neutral end outcome for Tyler Guyton, if anything, in my book. Christian Haynes did well, looked good. He's not going to be on here. Patrick Paul is a big name. A lot of people would be interested in him for the draft season here. And he would, if anything, he was a loser. Patrick Paul, I don't want to say he did bad necessarily, but he didn't impress. He didn't stand out amongst his peers. And for a guy who you're thinking even potentially putting a round 1 value on, if you can't stand out amongst your peers who are also attempting to be drafted all the way back to undrafted and 7th round picks playing in this game and in these practices against one another, that doesn't bode well for you to be a first round pick. As far as wide receivers go, Ladd McConkey made all the news on after day 1. He was all over, possibly the most talked about storyline after day 1 of practices. He did cool off in days 2 and 3, if you were not aware of that. So he did not keep that kind of steam going, which if he had gotten that much attention for 3 straight days and even in the actual game, that would have been a big story. But I will say, when it came to 11 on 11s and whatnot, Ladd definitely didn't require the ball to be thrown his way. He didn't get incredibly involved, so that was a little bit of a downer in that sense. Still, all in all, an exciting prospect nonetheless. Chris Broswell did well. Would have liked to see more from him. A little bit disappointing. That doesn't mean it hurt his draft stock necessarily. Depends exactly what you thought of him. But, he didn't solidify himself as some dominant first rounder. He didn't put himself up with Dallas Turner and Jared Verse or anything like that. Defensive line, T'Vondre Sweat's, of course, a big name. If you're not aware, it did not weigh in. That could ding him for a lot of NFL teams, and almost surely, just like it does for a lot of, even couch evaluators and everything, just gives you pause for concern. I mean, he's already listed at a very heavy weight. If you're not weighing in, you must believe that you weigh more than that, and to some sort of concerning extent. So, I don't know. That wasn't a good look. Running backs, Dylan Lobbs, scat back, receiving type of back, and Marshawn Lloyd, some guy who they said they wanted to see him prove that he could catch the ball. Both were talked about a whole lot on the broadcast. Both received a lot of love throughout this process. Cody Schrader, another guy who had a good overall Senior Bowl, although he's not going to get talked about a whole lot. It's tough to evaluate the running backs in this. Talifwanga, just all around did very, very good. Maybe didn't quite get himself in the top 3 conversation name for the position, but I think for those who didn't have him in the top 3, put himself into the top 3, if that makes any sense. Some people thought that he might be better than one of the top 2 or the top 2 linemen, that maybe a really good process could put him up into the same conversation with them. I don't know that he quite did that, but he definitely had a very, very good showing here and was talking about plenty. Same with Jordan Morgan's another big name coming into the draft, a first-round prospect, potentially. I thought he did some good things, had some less good things, so that's why he's not getting talked about a whole lot. It wasn't necessarily a good or bad performance for Jordan Morgan all in all. Jackson Powers Johnson, somebody who's getting talked about a whole lot. I'm not going to disagree with anything said about him. He was absolutely fantastic and dominant, and almost certainly put himself into the first round for center prospects. Of course, Roman Wilson received a whole lot of praise as well for how well he did. He did really follow up with that days 2 and 3 compared to Ladd McConkey, so he definitely helped his draft stock. Devontae Walker, lot of talk about him, which actually brings me also to Xavier Legette. He came in to this game. Both of these guys, if anything, hurt their draft stock. Xavier Legette, people thought he was like 6'3". Turns out he's 6'1". He wasn't very high up on my rankings to begin with, so this did not hurt his stock. I will say, if you only heard about him after day 1, it was very disappointing after day 1. Day 2 was better. Doesn't mean it was necessarily, it's not like it was bad, but doesn't mean it was great. But he rebounded a bit on day 2. Day 3, I would say, if anything, was I don't want to say poor once again, but not even as good as day 2, kind of just neutral. So all in all, not a real good process for Xavier Legette, and once again, it didn't hurt my stock because I had him a lot lower than a lot of people. I didn't see what a lot of people were talking about with him. I think people were calling him baby DK Metcalf. I would say, if anything, he's baby Rashee Rice, and I like Rashee Rice quite a bit. In fact, I was higher on him than most people for the... And I viewed him differently than a lot of people. Maybe that's why I was higher on him. Didn't view him as the deep threat kind of guy. And so to be a baby Rashee Rice, I don't know that gets you, Rashee Rice, back end of the round 2 kind of guy. He went, I would say, probably had like a 3rd grade value on him ultimately, though, for most teams, or at least for teams who liked him. Yeah, Xavier Legette, I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets taken on day 2, but probably leaning towards day 3 kind of prospect for me. If in my opinion. So Tez Walker really struggled. A lot of what he struggled with was catching the ball, unfortunately. And the thing is, that's not really been something he's actually had really good hands. That hasn't been something that's been a struggle for him throughout his career in college. So I'm not holding that against him too bad, but he's another guy who I wanted to like more than I ended up liking. I'm not too incredibly high on him. I have around 2 or 3 grade on him, so this did not hurt his draft stock for me either. Just kind of wasn't able to push him up because he didn't have a good week. Beyond that, Laiatu did fine. Didn't hurt his draft stock at all. Defensive end or edge rusher. I think that pretty much covers a lot of people. Gabe Hall had a huge day 1. Didn't necessarily follow that up on other days if you heard about his day 1. So running backs, Rasheen Ali, unfortunately, going to be out 4 to 6 months with a biceps injury. But the little bit of time that we did get with him, day 1 and into day 2, I was really impressed with him. What did I say about Rasheen? I said that he had a sweet slashing cut and go, one cut and go type of play. I thought that he showed patience, which I really like in a running back, and that he showed nice burst, which if you show good patience, you should probably have burst for that moment that you find your hole that you're looking for. So, that sucks. Probably undrafted territory now, but if your team ends up getting Rasheen Ali, look forward to him in the future. Just going to be missing everything throughout the offseason, though, unfortunately. Be ready once the regular season comes, so probably a practice squad guy. Probably, maybe 7th round if somebody believes in him, which they might. I really did like him. Then Ray Davis was a guy who did get talked about a lot, so I'm not going to sit here and talk about him, but I just want to shed a little bit of light on that once again. Ray Davis, tough to say a whole lot about running backs from these practices, this process. Doesn't really show you a whole lot for them, but somebody who got on my radar definitely looked good. He's a thick boy. And I would say he looks built better than AJ Dillon, even if you could both say both of them have like big quads. I don't know that Ray Davis looks a little more natural, a little less like he just got it in the weight room type of deal. Then moving on to these offensive linemen, a couple of my guys going to come out of this process for me until that's not a for sure thing. I have the right to revoke that, but of course it's not going to be easy to revoke a my guy tag. And so Christian Jones, I'm just going to go out there and say he's a my guy for me in this process, this early on in the process. I believe Texas offensive lineman, hadn't really heard about him coming into this week, but he was absolutely locked down like almost all 3 days. I did see one bad rep, a couple of whatever reps. It's not like he won them all, but I think his stock is probably going to skyrocket unless like some of the biggest things holding him back were maybe size or other attitude, those types of things. But for me, currently, based on what I know about him and based on what I saw for the Senior Bowl stuff, Christian Jones definitely up on my radar and quickly jumped up fairly high. I can't remember if I have a round value on him, maybe 3rd, 4th round type currently. Bo Limmer, guy who is getting a little bit of talk about, and it's just, to me, I'm not saying I don't think he's a day 2 guy even, but he did very, very well in this process. I'm thinking he's going to come up a little bit light and whatnot. I think he just needs a little bit of time to grow into this next level. He seemed like an underdog in all the reps, but he was like the underdog you were rooting for because he did try so hard and he stuck in there with every rep and he gave it his all. Whether he won or lost, he didn't lose by a whole lot, unless maybe he was playing T'Vondre Sweat. I think absolutely wiped him out one time. But for the most part, he was the kind of guy you want on your team, that kind of thing. He knows football. Then we got Roger Rosengarten, another name who jumped up onto my radar here for Roger. A couple of really, really good days. Didn't see too many people talk about that. So what did I say about Roger? It was the one-on-ones where he was really impressive, and that's where I really like to get the good evaluation on these guys. Dominic Pooney, a guy who was up on my radar already coming into this week and did nothing but help his draft stock, maybe pushed himself up ahead of a few people who were around the same range for what people were viewing him. Not only that, is he a tackle, is he a guard? He got used at both of them, performed well at both of them in the at the Senior Bowl practices. So always good to see that as well. Some versatility helps his draft value as well. And then Kingsley Suamatoa, I totally just said that incorrectly, but is a developmental high-end kind of prospect guy. I think maybe some people were trying to push him into the 1st round, potentially, and I don't think he did anything to get into the 1st round conversation. Just really wasn't very visible throughout the first 2 days, but on day 3, he did finally kind of show up and had put together some good raps and whatnot. So Kingsley did put on a show finally a little bit later on in the process throughout the week. And we will move on to some of these wide receivers, all the way up to the top here. Jaquan Jackson, not even on the PFF board currently, or at least not earlier on in the week. So definitely caught my eye. I actually have quite a few notes on Jaquan. I wrote that he was making plays both day 1 and day 2 of practice. I think he followed that up with a fine day 3. I believe I recall seeing him do a couple things on day 3 as well. I don't know that he did anything in the game that I can recall, and all my notes are higher up on here. But I didn't move those over here yet. But he is, I said, a speedy intermediate to deep route receiver. He laid out to get the reception, plays with a plan. Speedier guy, and has good football IQ and doesn't just go out there and wing it. So I really liked what I saw from a guy who really was, far down on a lot of radars. I think helped his draft stock immensely, and I didn't hear a whole lot of people talk about him, and I really think that he deserves to be talked about, just like a guy like Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint deserves to be talked about. I do think that he'll get a little bit more conversation going about him after post-Senior Bowl, and people referencing how he did in the Senior Bowl. He had a good week. It's all 3 days. He was one of those guys who he kept catching your eye, at least, on the broadcast. So I'm limited. I don't get to see everything on the broadcast, but even if you're at the Senior Bowl, you don't get to see everything either because a lot of it goes on at the same time. But from, the glimpses that you get, he was a guy who just kept standing out, and it's not like they were always pointing him out either. So he put together a solid few days, and at the end of the day, during the game, he did catch a touchdown from Spencer Rattler, another guy I didn't talk about. He's getting a lot of talk. So he didn't quite make the list as somebody who's getting under talked about. Let's see, Xavier Legette, day 3. He didn't show up. So I talked about that one already. Brendan Rice was a guy who I wanted to see a little bit more from, but at the same time, I do think that people are being a little bit harsh on him from what I saw. I hear a lot of he really struggles to separate. I thought he was creating enough separation. I thought at times he was actually making some moves where he was getting good separation even. And he's a bigger body guy, so he can play physical, and he doesn't need, I don't think, a huge amount of separation. Once again, would have liked to see more, but this is a case where I'm here to kind of defend him. I thought he looked pretty good overall. He didn't hurt his stock value for me. I don't know that he helped it, but he definitely didn't hurt it. A couple of safeties here. Jalen Simpson, converted cornerback. Where are you? He is a light dude, 178 pounds. Thought that he looked like he was reading the coverages very well. He has some good natural instincts, which is huge at the safety position. Natural instincts goes so far, it can beat out speed, even at safety. If you can be in the brain of the quarterback, if you can be beating him to the ball, that goes a very, very long ways from that position. And he had a good showing at the Senior Bowl throughout the entire thing, and during the game today at the Senior Bowl as well. I believe he might have had a pick in the game, but maybe not a pick. He had a good play. And then Tyke Smith was actually named, and he might be a cornerback. It depends where you source the information on him from. I actually do have him currently as a cornerback. I know some have him as a safety, but regardless, he's kind of like a star player if you're familiar with that. As far as Tyke Smith goes, I believe he was named the player of the game for the American team on defense. Made a few good plays. He didn't have a great practice. Nothing extremely noteworthy that people would be talking about, but I did notice him a couple of times making a few good plays throughout the days of practice. So once again, not enough to oh my god. I'm not moving him up in my draft stock value, but I'm not moving him down either, and I'm pretty high up on him, so it was nice to see him at least stand out a couple of times. Then for the cornerbacks, we're going to cut to another my guy. By the way, Tyke Smith might be a my guy, but Andrew Phillips is now a my guy. That was an unknown coming into this week for the Senior Bowl, but Andrew Phillips really stuck out to me. I've got a couple of notes on him. So here is where all of a sudden I was super impressed with him. You got 3 different types of wide receivers here that he covers, and he blankets all of them. First, he keeps up with Jamari Thrasher. Not a pure speed guy, but a guy who beats a lot of people on deep routes. Deep route, go route. He keeps up with him, sticks in his pocket, and prevents the ball from being caught. Then, he held tough against Johnny Wilson. If you're not familiar, Johnny Wilson, guy who people think should maybe convert over to tight end. He's like 6'7", Just kind of a big guy, a little bit too light to be a tight end at this point, but put on some weight, maybe he could get there. Whatever the case, especially compared to Andrew Phillips, who, by the way, is the guy in the thumbnail. He's much, much bigger, and ball gets thrown up there, and Andrew just keeps him up onto the sideline, doesn't allow Johnny Wilson to be able to get up and catch the ball, high point it or anything, and knocks it down. So love to see the toughness from Andrew Phillips in that situation. You see the speed and the brains to keep up with a guy who's, you know, really good at deep routes. You see the toughness, and then you see the quickness, because this is on day one too, when Ladd McConkey got all of the hype. He stayed hip to hip with Ladd, which is really, really tough to do in those drills. They're kind of built to help a guy like Ladd McConkey look good in those one-on-ones, and Andrew Phillips was right there, so I love the dude. He is currently most definitely a my guy. Then we got Jarvis Brownlee Jr., guy who's going to come out of this process with a little bit more talk. He might have had to pick in this game. He had a good Senior Bowl game, and really once you come to day 3, I believe it is when he really exploded, and he had shown himself a couple of times in the previous 2 days, so it was kind of one of those things that built for him. I believe he is maybe a guy who got called up last second to be invited when somebody else couldn't make it to the Senior Bowl. So he took, you know, advantage of that opportunity and more. Then Max Melton, another guy, but didn't blow your socks off or anything unless you're able to maybe watch him a little bit more. As far as what I was able to see on TV, it sounds like he had a little bit of a better day than what we got to see on TV. But when he was on TV, he was, for the most part, making plays, even if they weren't always super impressive, showed off his speed. Another guy who's he's on the borderline of being of my guy. Need to see more, but I like what I know of him so far quite a bit, and he did nothing but help his stock. And I'm higher on him because I guess he kind of is my guy at this point based on where I have him compared to where most people have him in their rankings. Then Cam Hart, Kyrie Jackson, two guys who you consistently, Cam Hart throughout the entire process, saw him. Kyrie Jackson, I think a little bit less, but on day 3 he came through really, really strong. So two guys who I thought had strong performances, and Kyrie Jackson had an absolutely dominant shutdown day on day 3 of practice, which once again I think leads to a little bit less conversation getting about him by that point. And then Chow Smith-Wade was much like Marcus Rosemary, Jack Saint. He just kept showing up throughout the broadcast. He kept seeing him. He kept making some good plays. And they built up throughout the process. Like, I originally wasn't going to be writing his name down, just like Rosemary Jack Saint. But then day 2 comes along, you see his names again. And day 3 comes along, and you see more plays being made, and maybe more impressive ones even than days 1 and 2. And it all just snowballs into a really, really good, stock going up here for Chow Smith-Wade. And that's what we're focusing mostly on this video, is guys who did well. I don't want to be negative with this. And so when we get to the linebackers, Cedric Gray, another guy, just kept seeing him be around the ball, made some plays here and there. Maybe didn't knock your socks off, but he did have quite a good actual game today. So Cedric Gray, I think, if nothing else, proving himself to be worthy of where he is currently ranked for a lot of people. So, yeah, there you go for him. Then J.D. Bertrand, I believe Notre Dame linebacker, very vocal leader. I've heard that from a few different sources about him, so that's very clearly true. And you want that on your team. Coaches love that, so he's definitely going to be a guy to keep on your radar, and expect him to be going maybe higher than his actual talent would suggest, just because he is bringing some of those intangibles to a team. And then Nathaniel Watson kept making some plays today at the Senior Bowl. He actually made a few, and I didn't remember it at the time, but then when I went back and I looked at my notes, he also made it on my notes for a couple of plays that he made throughout the week this week. So Nathaniel Watson, also give him a little bit of a shout out at linebacker, somebody I'll keep an eye on and be looking for the results from the rest of the process here before the week. And he's on my radar already. As far as edge rushers, Austin Booker and Jalen Harrell, a couple of names don't hear too much about, had good weeks. Austin Booker more so than Jalen Harrell, but Jalen Harrell also made some good plays. Austin Booker, I have quite a bit more written up on him. I did say that he was a little inconsistent, doesn't have a complete game yet, developmental kind of guy, but seemingly makes more plays than not. He even put a guy on the skates right back into the quarterback despite being a speed rusher. So you like to see that. You like to see that he can win in a couple of different ways, especially against his peers who are also being drafted. And then day 2, that was day 1. Day 2 came through and he had an even stronger day. And day 3, he started off with a great spin move and still continued to have a good day as well. So Austin Booker killed it throughout the entirety of the process. Jalen Harrell showed up less so than that, but he did show up also in the game. I believe he had a fumble recovery during the game, and I think he might have been a part of causing that fumble. And then he did get some pressure during the 11-on-11 drills. So that's where he usually was standing out, not necessarily in the one-on-ones. As far as the defensive line, there's Darius Robinson, definitely proved himself. But another guy who's might have helped his stock just as much or more was Braden Fisk. This guy, honestly, not because of the attitude. I don't necessarily know his attitude yet, and I wouldn't say Max Crosby didn't have the same attitude quite at this point in his career as he does currently. But Braden Fisk plays with the quickness that I always loved from Max Crosby as a prospect. So Braden Fisk, once again, I'm not comping him to Max Crosby. I don't know enough about him yet, and I would need to see those athletics combine stuff for him. But he had a very, very good process. He is a name who you might have heard, but I'm going to give him one more shout out because boy, oh boy, if he can get off the line that quickly, that's going to cause problems for offenses. I don't care who you are. And then Dwayne Carter, national team, also put together a couple of good days. He had a strong rep, got a sack against Michael Penix, and he was just good in general at getting penetration, especially along these goal line drills against the run on day 3. Did very good against the run there. And once again, also got an internal pressure for a sack earlier on I think, day 1. So he showed up here and there throughout the process, like many guys, but he was one that I wanted to point out because I did find him impressive at times. That is it. Thank you very, very much. We'll end the video there. If you have any questions on anyone, if you have anybody that you were impressed by, please let me know in the comments. Please like, comment, and subscribe on the video. That all helps as well. And it's nice to chat again with y'all. I hope you've been doing well. Peace out.